Hey guys, in this video we will talk about solving quadratics using factoring and completing the square. In order to start, you need to understand what solving means. When you are solving a quadratic, you're finding those x-intercepts, you're finding those roots, you're finding those solutions, you're finding those zeros. At every x-intercept, x is a number and y is 0. You're trying to figure out how far over you had to go left or right, and you don't go up at all or down. So y is 0, and you need to understand that. So instead of y, I'm going to put 0, and 0 is really nothing, so I'm not even going to write it. I'm just going to write it as x squared minus 12x plus 20. It equals 0, but again, if I say equals 0, it really means it doesn't equal anything, so I'm just going to leave it be. Alright, so factoring. I have to do the in my head part. Two numbers that multiply, two numbers that add. I need two numbers that multiply to give me a times c. I need two numbers that multiply to give me 1 times 20, which is 20. But then they need to add to give me negative 12. I'm thinking back to the rules my teacher taught me. I'm looking, and it looks like I have this scenario here where I had a positive and a negative. So both of my numbers are going to be negatives. Alright, so numbers that multiply to give me 20, add to give me negative 12. Easy. 10 and 2. Is negative 10 times negative 2 going to give me a positive 20? Yes. Is negative 10 plus negative 2 going to get me a negative 12? Yes. Alright. So, I'm going to rewrite my middle term. And instead of 12x, I'm going to have a 10x, a negative 10x, and a negative 2x. So, here we go. I still have my x squared. But now, instead of negative 12x, I have negative 10x. And I have negative 2x. And I still have my positive 20 in the back. I'm going to group the first two, group the last two. The GCF of my first two seems like it'll be just x. The GCF of my second two looks like they have a 2 in common, but since my 2 in the front is negative, I have to make my GCF the same sign as the number up front. Alright, factor out my GCF. I had 2 x's, I take out an x, that leaves me with just 1 x. I have a negative 10x, and I am taking out an x, so that leaves me with just a negative 10. Alright, my second one, my second group, I have a negative 2. Negative 2x divided by negative 2. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1, and it's just an x there. Positive 20 divided by negative 2. A positive divided by negative is a negative. 20 divided by 2 is 10. I'm happy. I have twins. What are we going to call these twins? I don't know. I'm running out of twin names. How about violet and purple? Because technically they're the same thing. Alright. And it's my favorite color. Why not? Write my GCFs. That's my first factor. And my second factor are my twins, violet and purple. And they're x minus 10. I have factored it, but the question did not ask me to factor. The question asked me to solve by factoring. So I'm not done. I am not done at all. Alright, so what do I need to do? This part, not complicated at all. Since I have my two factors, I just need to set my factors equal to 0. If you remember at the very beginning, I had y equals this. This turned into this, but it's still a y equals up front. And remember, I told you that y was 0. So it's not even a y equals. It's 0 equals. So 0 equals x minus 2 and 0 equals x minus 10. The only way to get something equal to 0 when you're multiplying them is if one of these are 0. Because 10 times 0 is 0. 0 times 10 is 0. But if these weren't 0, then it couldn't possibly be equal to 0. Because if it's 1, you get a number. If it's anything besides 0, when you multiply it, you're not going to get 0. So either x minus 2 is going to be 0, because then this is 0. Whatever this number turns out to be, I'll still get it equal to 0. Or x minus 10 will equal 0. Because if this was 0, whatever this is, doesn't matter. It could be 15,000. 15,000 times 0 will get me my 0. So, solve. And there you go. I have my two x values. Let's say x is 2. What's 2 minus 2? 0. And 0 times, if this was 2, that'd be negative 8. 0 times negative 8 would get me my 0. If it was 10, well, that's negative, actually that's positive 8. But then this right here would be 0, because 10 minus 10 is 0. So then that's 8 times 0, that would get me 0. So x can be 2, because then that would make this factor 0, or x can be 10, and that would make this factor 0. And when you multiply them, you get 0. So, that's my answer. My x-intercepts are at 2, 0, and 10, 0. And these are my answers. Please understand, these are x-intercepts, so they are coordinates. Since they are coordinates, I need to write them as such. So, I've written them. Here we go to the next one. Same exact quadratic. The only thing is that I'm not going to solve it by factoring. I'm going to solve it by completing the square. But again, solving means y is 0. So, that's exactly what I'm going to write. X squared minus 12x plus 20 equals 0. If you know how to complete the square, the first half is not that bad at all. So in order to complete the square, I need my variables on one side. I need my constants on the other side of the equal sign. And so what I need to do then is minus 20 from both sides. Because if I get rid of the 20 on that side, I'm left with my variables over here and my constants over there. So I am now left with x squared minus 12x equals negative 20. Alright, if you notice I left a space here. I left a space because I have to put squares on both sides of my equation. And in those squares are going to go my b term divided by 2 squared. B divided by 2 squared is what goes in my squares. Okay, so b, if you remember quadratics, ax squared plus bx plus c, that's my standard form. A in this case is a imaginary 1. B is a negative 12. And I move my constant over, so I don't really have a c. I don't need to worry about that. Alright, so b is negative 12. So what I need to do is I need to take over to the side somewhere. Over to the side, I'm going to have b divided by 2 squared. And b was negative 12. So I'm going to have negative 12 divided by 2 squared. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Then I have to square that sucker. So my answer would be 36. Because negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. And that's what goes in my square. A 36. Alright, all my hard work is done. All I need to do now is draw my parentheses squared. And then I'm going to put x, because that's my variable. And right here, I'm going to put b divided by 2. Not b divided by 2 squared, just b divided by 2. So b divided by 2 was right here, because remember it was negative 12 divided by 2. We got negative 6. So I'm going to put minus 6. And that's going to equal negative 20 plus 36. It seems like that'll be 16. So these two come together to give me 16. Alright, so my hard work is done. I have completed the square. I have x minus 6 squared equals 16. Alright, so now that I've completed the square, I'm not done because it didn't ask me to complete the square. It asked me to solve by completing the square. So this is what I get when I complete the square. Now I need to solve it. It gets a little more complicated because I have an x here and it's not just being squared, it's x minus 6 being squared. So in order to get rid of a square, I have to square root. In order to get rid of a subtraction, I need to add. In order to get rid of division, I multiply. In order to get rid of multiplication, I divide. And in order to get rid of a square, I square root. So since I already have the square by itself, I square root both sides. And when you square root a square, they cancel each other out. So since they got canceled out, all that's left over here is x minus 6. And over here is the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is either positive 4, because I would get 4 times 4 to get me 16, or it could be negative 4, because negative 4 times negative 4 would still give me a positive 16. So it's plus or minus 4. Alright, I have plus or minus 4. I need to solve for x. X is not by itself because I have a minus 6 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So now, got rid of those. And I have x equaling 6, because that's what I added, to the plus or minus 4. Alright. This is the easy part. This is 6 plus 4, and this is 6 minus 4. And that's exactly what I'm going to write. X equals 6 plus 4. X equals 6 minus 4. Well, what's 6 plus 4? 10. Well, what's 6 minus 4? 2. So my x-intercepts, my coordinates, 10, 0, 2, 0. Because again, x-intercepts means that my y's are 0. And if you remember correctly, isn't that the same answer I got when I solved by factoring? It is. So no matter if you're solving by factoring or solving by completing the square, you will get the same answers. Please note, you cannot always solve every quadratic by factoring because not every quadratic is factorable. Some quadratics are prime. So be wary of this. This factoring does not work for every quadratic. Solving by completing the square gets complicated sometimes. It gets complicated because you're not always going to have a being 1. Sometimes you're going to have a being 2, 3, 5. And you have to factor out a. So sometimes you're going to get fractions, funky decimals, all sorts of weird stuff. So solving by completing the square is not always your best option either. The best option, what works every time you want to solve a quadratic, is the quadratic formula. And you will see that later on in another video. Or you've already seen it. Anyways, if you have any questions, please leave a comment. If you have any questions, please ask me in class. And I hope this video helped. If it didn't, please let me know what other questions you have. Have a great day. Bye.